Okay, so this is the next installment of our moving through the PowerPoint that I've created to try and get you a ground foundation for art as it appears in Quizbowl. And so we're starting on number 106 in the list, and that would be my favorite artist of my childhood, Norman Rockwell. He was an illustrator for a 20th century periodical, the Saturday Evening Post. That's important to know. And here you can see one of his famous paintings of a self-portrait, which he's looking in the mirror, painting himself here. On the right, you can see a Vincent van Gogh self-portrait, all kinds of other goofy stuff that is here. I forget where I was, but there was a Conway Twitty. Conway Twitty has an album that basically has this on it. And I thought it was kind of odd. At any rate, if you don't know who Conway Twitty is, he's a country artist of the mid-20th century. But it was the funniest thing. I don't know where I was that I saw it, but it was in the last year or so. But lots and lots of good stuff for Norman Rockwell. However, his most famous two sets of paintings that come up is going to be his Four Freedoms. That would be of here. You can see freedom of speech. You can see a fellow standing up and talking, perhaps in a community meeting. Freedom of worship, some folks that are praying here. Freedom from want, and you can see a classic, like a Thanksgiving scene. This fellow here staring at the viewer, in which couple of grandparents, it looks like, the grandmother putting the large turkey on the table, and then freedom from fear down here at the bottom right, in which you can see a couple of parents worried about their sick children that are there. And so you have the Four Freedoms speech, and the other one that comes up quite a bit and is really, really good, the problem we all live with, which shows the Ruby Bridges, who is not that old. I don't think she's hit 70 years old yet. So what we are talking about is in recent past. But she's the first child to integrate elementary school in the United States. It was in New Orleans, and you can see the tomatoes in the background and the horrible slur and being escorted by officials to try and protect her. But the problem we all live with. There are others for Norman Rockwell, and I encourage you to look him up. But in the interest of time, we will move on, and we come to, of course, Andy Warhol. I would argue probably the most well-known pop artist. He was active in the latter half of the 20th century, and there is a lot of stuff with which he is associated. Silk screens, the paintings of tomato soup cans, all kinds of other stuff as well. And he comes up so often in Quizbowl, I think it would be wise that we go and check out his Wikipedia page really quickly here. Inevitably, you have to know the name of his studio was called The Factory. You can see it right there, well-known gathering place that brought together, as it says, intellectuals, drag queens, playwrights, bohemian street people, Hollywood celebrities, all kinds of stuff. He is, of course, credited for the expression, everybody at one point in their life will have 15 minutes of fame. You can see it right there. Just an absolutely seminal figure in pop art. And you can see his silkscreen paintings. He was very much a silkscreener. Campbell soup cans, the Marilyn diptych, that was the multiple images of Marilyn Monroe. You have experimental films, Empire, which I think is just the unchanging view of the Empire State Building. I think it's like 100 hours long, at any rate. And Chelsea Girls is another film. The Exploding Plastic Inevitable, a multimedia event, comes up quite a bit as well for him. A couple of things also that comes up with questions. He's very often going to include his, as you can see, portrait of Mao Zedong, the Chinese leader of the 20th century in China, and also his association with the Velvet Underground. And so we're going to look up Velvet, and there it is. And he produced the first album for the Velvet Underground, which was the Velvet Underground and Nico, and it's incredibly famous for a banana on the cover with Andy Warhol's signature that is there. So just something obviously to take note of. Lots of clues for him. He comes up quite a bit, so it would be very helpful if making a card for him to not only look at his Wikipedia page, but also check out how it comes up in QB Reader, and particularly what does Quizbowl ask about him very often. But Andy Warhol of The Factory. Then we get Roy Lichtenstein. Roy Lichtenstein's most famous for the left-hand work called Drowning Girl, in which she's got the little thought bubble, I don't care, I'd rather sink than call Brad for help. And so it's kind of like a cartoonish style does Roy Lichtenstein have. And the last of the three pop artists that you need to know is going to be Jasper Johns, that you can see there, and he is famous for his American flag. So you could have as the answer line the American flag with lots of different clues about different areas, and then one of the clues could be Jasper Johns, and hopefully that's what lets you get it at that point. But we move on, and we move on to another 20th century artist, Christo. And Christo's collaborator and longtime partner is important to know and slips my mind. So what we're going to do is look it up real quick. Again, thanks for watching. Christo, there it is. There she is, Jean-Claude. So both of them died rather recently. Christo in just 2020, as you can see there, and Jean-Claude in 2009. But they do lots of interesting stuff. But we'll look at it in my PowerPoint. But there you can see umbrellas in 1991, which he puts them in a landscape. He kind of uses landscape, the gates of Central Park in 2005, floating piers in 2016, the London Mastaba in 2018. Lots and lots of interesting stuff, at least I think, that Christo does. But in my PowerPoint, I've included his draping the Reichstag with fabric. The Reichstag is the German parliament, and so he covered the whole thing in fabric. The gates of Central Park that you can see there, he put all these rather large-scale, colorful gates. He does things on a large scale, and we saw earlier the umbrellas and other items as well. So now we move on from traditional art, as in sculpture, painting, and art like this, into architecture. And so when it comes to architecture, you need to know the Gothic movement, and of course, previous to that, the Romanesque movement of the various different types. And I've got a word on architecture after we get past this, but the medieval period sees the rise of Gothic architecture that allows for these huge, tall walls that are supported by these things called flying buttresses that you can see right here. You often will have a rose window. You have the bell towers. I think this one, I'm almost positive, is Notre Dame, which unfortunately had a fire in 2019, 18, something like that, but is maybe hopefully restored. But these are Gothic cathedrals to know. The most famous of them all is, of course, Notre Dame in Paris. But you also have the Milan Cathedral, Chartres, which might be the second most famous the Gothic cathedrals in France, Reims, Cologne, which I don't want to say it is for sure, but either Reims or Cologne is the tallest of the Gothic cathedrals. There is one famously in Canterbury, which, of course, after the active supremacy with King Henry VIII, in which the Catholic Church was rejected, and he, the monarch, became the head of the Anglican Church, is now the seat of the Anglican Church. So we have the Archbishop of Canterbury. Westminster Abbey, where the monarchs of England and the UK are crowned, and in Salisbury. So those are Gothic cathedrals to know. But before we talk about the Sagrada Familia, there's an incredibly famous architect, and one that might be the most famous architect to know, that I do not have in my PowerPoint, but that would be Andrea Palladio, that you can see right there. And his work, the 4 books of architecture, might be the most important work of architecture in history. He is on level at a influential point with Vitruvius, who, of course, ancient Roman living during the time of Julius Caesar, wrote De Architectura. He's also the inspiration for Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. But particularly where you can see the influence of Palladio is that when Thomas Jefferson was building, and here you can see some of Palladio's works that are here, when Thomas Jefferson was building, of course, Monticello, I'm going to go ahead and Control F, Jefferson, there it is. When he was building Monticello, it was very much influenced by Palladio. So there you can see Monticello, which essentially he always did. Thomas Jefferson in its design and construction have 4 books of architecture of Palladio on hand, in his hand. But at any rate, so I didn't include it in my PowerPoint because my PowerPoint is incomplete, but I wanted to make sure that I included it in this recording. So this brings us to Barcelona. Barcelona as an answer line is often rather popular. There is a famous salamander sculpture in Barcelona that comes up as a clue. But the crown jewel of Barcelona is this cathedral called the Sagrada Familia by Antonio Gaudí. And over 100 years after it was begun, it is still unfinished. But I have read that there is great optimism that it will be finished in your lifetime, if not mine. And so that is hopeful. But at any rate, it's a spectacular just monumentally rising into the sky cathedral that, as you can see rather plainly, with some of the parts still being built unfinished. But Gaudi's Sagrada Familia in Barcelona on the southern coast. Other architects of note, Louis Sullivan, who is responsible for one of the first skyscrapers, as you can see here, the Wainwright Building in St. Louis. In the great Chicago's World Fair of 1893, Sullivan played a role in creating the White City, as it came to be known, all the buildings that were built specifically for the fair. And that's why Chicago sometimes is referred to, for that event, 1893, as the White City. But at any rate, Louis Sullivan's Wainwright Building, you have Mies van der Rohe, who, of course, is responsible for the Seagram Building. Go and look up Mies. Mies actually is the part of the name that is the surname that you would need to provide, not van der Rohe. So Mies is the part that would be underlined in the answer line. But he is responsible for the Seagram Building, as you can see here in New York City. And Le Corbusier. Le Corbusier is famous for 1923 work called Towards a New Architecture. And I think he is also the person responsible for saying that a house is a machine for living. I want to make sure that I'm right on that. And so let's go look it up. And I'm chewing this off the top of my head. Le Corbusier, there he is. And then we're going to say... Control F, machine. There it is. A house is a machine to live in. But at any rate, he was quite fond of skyscrapers particularly. And when he had finally made his way, and he's a Swiss-French architect, as it were, born in Switzerland. But when he came to the United States, and particularly New York for the first time, everybody was so curious as to what his reaction would be, because New York, it's the mecca of skyscrapers. And they asked him, what did he think about the New York skyscrapers? And he declared that he was disappointed. He found them much too small. But that is Le Corbusier. House is a machine to live in, with his work towards a new architecture. Now, Frank Lloyd Wright. I would argue he is by far the most common architect to come up in Quizbowl, bar none. Like Isaac Newton, he was a jerk extraordinaire, but he is responsible for the Prairie School. And we're going to go look at his Wikipedia page to make sure that we cover it all. But put Frank Lloyd Wright into QB Reader, and you can see a lot will come up. Perhaps the most famous thing is his Kaufman House, also known as Falling Water. This is in Pennsylvania, and the name of the stream over which it is built is called Bear Run. And you can see that it is cantilevered over it, as it were, Falling Water. The Guggenheim edition in New York is his work as well. But he is so important and comes up so often, we need to take a moment to look at his Wikipedia page. And there you can see it. He was originally from Wisconsin, studied civil engineering at the University of Wisconsin, but later he was associated with Oak Park, Illinois. His name of his estate in Wisconsin was known as Taliesin, and he also has Taliesin West in Arizona, and that's important to know as well. His Prairie School movement of architecture developed the concept of the Usonian home, so you can go ahead and click on that if you were to want to do that, but we're going to take a scroll down and look, and you can just see all of the buildings. You have Falling Water, which we just took a look at, which is the Kaufman House. You have the Guggenheim Museum, which we just took a look at as well, that comes up quite a bit. And here you can see it, Taliesin in Wisconsin. And you have Taliesin West, which, of course, is in Arizona. You have the Imperial Roby House comes up as well. That is the landmark there. It's on the campus of the University of Chicago and the south side neighborhood of Hyde Park. So Roby House comes up. Imperial Hotel comes up quite a bit as well. And I think it was responsible for surviving a earthquake and noted in that particular way. I'm just scanning really quickly to see other things that I remember coming up. But those are the ones to really make sure that you are familiar with. So Imperial Hotel, Roby House, Taliesin, both Taliesin and Taliesin West, and then Kentuck Knob sometimes as well. But at any rate, the Prairie Style, all of that comes up quite a bit for Frank Lloyd Wright. So make sure you're familiar with him, and he will earn you points. You next have Eero Saarinen, who I think is Finnish. I could be wrong. Maybe I should look it up. But he is responsible for the Gateway Arch in St. Louis, because St. Louis was the gateway to the west and the site from which Lewis and Clark set sail up the Missouri River. And there you can see it on the banks of the Missouri River, the Gateway Arch, Eero Saarinen. I want to say he's Finnish. I got to look it up, though, and satisfied that I did not have it all messed up. Saarinen. Certainly he would have come up. Saarinen. Oh, have I misspelled his name? I guess we could just put in Gateway Arch, and that's just as good. So there it is. So it is, what's the tallest arch? Oh, there it is, Finnish-American Eero Saarinen. Yes, there he is. So I was right in that. Good for me. Nevertheless, just know Saarinen, St. Louis Gateway Arch. And then we move on to Chinese-American I.M. Pei. I.M. Pei recently died, I think maybe in the year 2020, 2019, something like that. But he's famous for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland. You can see that he's designed there. The Glass Pyramid at the Louvre, as well as others. And he also is someone that comes up quite a bit. So therefore, it would behoove us to take a look at the things which he is famous for. There it is. 2019 was the year of his death. But at any rate, he Chinese-American, originally born in Guangzhou in China. But as you can see, when you scroll down looking at his buildings, he's got the John F. Kennedy Library. He also has the Louvre Pyramid that we just looked at a second ago. He's got the Bank of China Tower in Hong Kong. Why is it not coming up to take a look at it? There it is. Bank of China Tower, one of the most recognizable landmarks in Hong Kong. You have the Museum of Islamic Art in Doha. There you can see it. Indiana University Art Museum, that is there. And as we saw a second ago, the Museum of Art Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and the John Hancock Tower. That comes up quite a bit for I.M. Pei as well. And there you can see it, the John Hancock Tower. Important to know, to be sure. So, at any rate, it is in Boston. So I.M. Pei and Partners is responsible for it. And so they go to finally then the last couple of entries for this. And there you can see is the Glass Pyramid at the Louvre, designed by I.M. Pei. And you have then Frank Gehry, who is still alive and kicking. I don't even think he's that old. But you've got the Experience Music Project. That's down here. That's in Seattle. It is the centerpiece is the revolutionary rock guitarist Jimi Hendrix. And then, of course, you have the Guggenheim of Bilbao, Spain, which is in the north of the country. And then I'm quite fond of his dancing building that you see here, which I don't know exactly where it is located, but Frank Gehry, is responsible for it. The last one we have is going to be Oscar Niemeyer, who is not only responsible for these buildings that you see here, here, and here, he is most famous as the architect of Brasilia. When the Brazilians were contemplating moving their capital towards the interior of the country, the city was actually designed by architect that you can see there, Oscar Niemeyer, architect of Brazil's capital, Brasilia. You need to know Art Deco. This is the Chrysler Building, which for only a few weeks in the early 1930s was the tallest building in the world, but both the exterior, which you can see here, it has a unique style to it. I just love the Chrysler Building. That's why I think, and I'm not alone in this, maybe my favorite skyscraper, but just fantastic all the way around. But it exemplifies both on the exterior and the interior Art Deco. Early part of the 20th century, kind of a modern style is Art Deco. And then you can have other skyscrapers to know. You got to know your skyscrapers on NAQT. So go and visit that. This being the tallest building in the world, the Burj Khalifa. But there are lots and lots of others. But you can go and check that out and be all up to date with all of the skyscrapers that one needs to know. And let's go do that now then, I suppose. We have time. We're only on minute number 20. And so if we go to, you got to know the skyscrapers. We're going to take a real quick look at them. Practice and learn. You got to know. We're going to go browse by category, even though I think it was most recent. Visual art and skyscrapers. Yep, 2019. So you have the Burj Khalifa, which is in Dubai. Empire State Building, which, of course, completed in 1931, thus eclipsing the Chrysler Building. Also, the Empire State Building is Art Deco, as you can see right there. You have the Abraj Al Bait, but I'm unfamiliar with this one. Shanghai Tower, that's important. I've heard of that one before. One World Trade Center. Note that it is 1,776 feet tall. That's intentional. That our country was founded in that year. And so that is the tower they built on the site of the World Trade Centers that had obviously come down in the 9/11 attacks. It's also known as the Freedom Tower sometimes, or One World Trade. The Willis Tower, which is in Chicago. It, of course, used to be known as the Sears Tower, but it changed its name. The Shard, which is in London. You also, I think, have the Gherkin. The Gherkin is in London as well. Taipei 101, which is, of course, in Taipei, the capital of Taiwan. The Petronas Towers, which was the tallest in the world when it was built in the late 90s, named after a oil company in Malaysia, the capital, Kuala Lumpur. And the two towers are connected by a sky bridge on the 41st and 42nd floors. It looks really cool. You should go check it out. And then St. Regis, Chicago. But it's the third tallest building in Chicago behind the Willis Tower and Trump International Hotel and Tower. But those are the ones to know, but by far the ones that come up the most, I would say, Burj Khalifa, Empire State Building, and, of course, Chrysler Building. These others at times Willis Tower, but those are the ones. But keep studying. This one's a little bit longer than others, but we are almost home. The next installment is going to be photography, and that will then be it for visual art. Study.